All right, so this is the landing page for Academy Analytics, also known as the dashboard. Everything is broken up. If you hear me say widgets, each one of these areas here is a widget that shows you different data, and some of them are displayed in a different way. You can see here pie chart versus a line chart or bar chart. So this first one is the number of cases that telecommunicators have handled. You can see a total count of cases. And then by telecommunicator along the bottom, you can see the count of cases that the telecommunicators have handled within this date range up here at the upper top or at the upper right hand side, the last 12 hours. You can drill down by clicking on these and seeing the records if you need more information about those individual records. Next is the telecommunicators average call taking and average time to reach the dispatch point. So one of the things that I want to clarify here is this is the dispatch point. So the point at which ProQA says that the case is ready for being dispatched and is not the actual time that you dispatched a unit in your CAD system. So this will show by dispatcher the average call taking and time to reach dispatch point, again, for the date range up here that we have selected, which right now is for the last 12 hours. Next up is the distribution level breakdown that shows the breakdown of all of the distribution levels within the last 12 hours of the calls or the cases that have been handled by ProQA. The next one is the outlier cases, where right now this is hard-coded. ProQA's start to dispatch determinant is greater than 2 minutes. I do have plans to make this configurable so that you can configure if you don't want it 2 minutes, if you wanted it a longer time, or if it were, for example, a Delta or Echo call where you might want to have it a shorter period of time, where you would be able to do that. So look for that coming up in the future.
Yeah, Scott, if I can just talk about that one a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if this was my agency, I would be super interested in seeing any echo level calls that maybe took longer than 36 seconds to dispatch or something like that. If it was an alpha or omega, maybe I'm not so concerned about that 2 minute hard coded outlier time frame. So I think that's one of the things that Scott was kind of talking about is we're always looking for ways to improve. We're looking for feedback. And that is one thing, like Scott said, that we have scoped out for a future iteration to make that a little bit more user defined.
Yeah, thanks, Carlin. The last widget on the dashboard page is the last 5 cases handled by your telecommunicators. That kind of gives you an idea of what portion of that call has been or was used for case entry, key questions, etc. So it kind of gives you a breakdown of the percentage of time that that call took for each one of those areas.
Perfect. I don't know if you mentioned, but the dashboard is kind of meant to just be up and showing you pretty much what's happening right now. So thus the 12-hour date range, or you can change that a little bit, but just kind of a glance and go, oh, this is where we're at right now. This is, you know, near real-time data that we can focus on.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Carlin. That's absolutely correct. The date range on the dashboard is a little bit different than the rest of the date ranges in that it is always the last 12 hours or starting at, if you wanted to add a start time that's different than any one of these, but it's always up until the current time. Whereas if you go into the time series chart, for example, you'll notice that you have a standard type date range where you can choose a start and an end time. So if you wanted to look at a particular week in the past, you can certainly do that.
Perfect. And some of these, sorry, Scott, I'm walking all over you, but some of these things, I have my favorites and little nuggets of data that I love to look for in them. But I don't want to take away from Angela's presentation today, where she's going to talk a little bit about how she uses it. And so I'll wait till she's done and maybe jump back in and tell you some of my favorites.
Sounds good. On the time series chart, we have the time in the problem field So for the last, this is the last 2 weeks, 5/12 to 5/26, the amount of time that was spent in the problem field on average for incidents. The same thing for case entry and time and key questions. One of the things I wanted to point out, I just want to make sure everyone knows, is that we do have the ability to click on any one of these points. So if you wanted to see, for example, this shows that we have 13 cases that were between 41 and 45 seconds. If I wanted to click on that, I can again drill down into those cases.
Perfect. And just to clarify, time in the problem field is actually referring to, okay, tell me exactly what happened. We know how critical that question is.
Yeah, that is correct. The PAI time for the pre-arrival instructions, post-dispatch instructions, and then the total time in ProQA. You can also see your call volume by month. So if you have in your date range up here greater than a month selected, you would see each one of those months here. So if I were to choose April to May, I would now see both April and May in there. And then I can see
let me just point out, Scott, too, how quickly that loaded. There isn't much of a delay when you add more data. It's pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. We've done a lot of work to pre-calculate the data on the backside so that there isn't too much of a wait when you have to change date ranges or bring back different date ranges. And the last one is call volume by day of week, where again, you can click on any one of these bar charts to drill down. The next section is one of our newer sections, and that one is time trend. So this one shows you, and this is by month, so let me just go by week.
And that's that's kind of a relatively new feature too, is to be able to sort that or to look at that by, break it out by day, week, month, whatever you're interested in seeing it as.
Yeah, that's correct. The date range here that we have selected for this, it looks like about a month or about 6 weeks. So we can see that the average time by week, this is really good if you have training that you've just done to see if that has had any impact or any effect on your dispatch times. So you can see not only with the last charts what your average is for those 2 weeks, but how it's trended over those times.
I'm seeing in the chat a lot of people joining us just wanting to learn more about the product. So that's good to hear.
Awesome. Yeah. And with the time trend, we have the same widgets as we did in the time series. So we have the average problem time. And again, as Carlin said, that's the tell me exactly what happened, case entry, key questions, pre-arrival, post-dispatch, and then the average total time by month. So you can see each one of those granularly and how they've been trending either up or down for the time period you have selected for the date range you have selected.
So Scott, if I wanted to see it as a column or bar chart, am I able to do that?
Absolutely. You can click on the ellipses up here in the upper right of each widget, and you can say show as a bar chart or show as a column chart. Or if you wanted to export this out to a report that you're doing, you can export as a PDF or as a graphic file as a PNG file.
Perfect. And that usually works really good if those exports, if you want to take any of this information to your dispatch steering committee, to your dispatch review committee, anything like that, you know, export it, print it, and away you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up is the final dispatch that shows the final dispatch levels. Again, this is within the date range that's specified. You can also see the top 10 final chief complaints, the top 10 final dispatch codes, and you'll notice that the chief complaints is just the protocol number or the card number, whereas the dispatch codes represents the entire dispatch code. The frequency of aborted calls, the final dispatch level by hour, and the frequency of reconfigured calls. And then next we have call volume. This just shows the call volume by discipline. And currently it's set by month. And again, I can set this by week.
So Scott, if I only wanted to see that for maybe an A shift or a B shift, is there a way to filter that out?
Yeah, we have the filters section over here in the very top right. Let me move it out of the way of the, where I can go through and say, for example, today is Wednesday. If I only wanted to show the crews between 8 and 5, I can say, okay, apply filters. And then that will show the crews or show the hours where the cases occurred between 0800 and 1700 hours.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was asking. Thank you.
On that particular one, if I have a floating dispatcher, and you can select it by the telecommunicator as well. So if I wanted to see just the floating dispatchers, you could select them under the telecommunicator. Obviously, on the other report, you see it by their initials, but that's their employee number. So you can select it there as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And lastly, the call volume by hour of day and day of week, which is just a heat map that just kind of shows the number of cases that you've had for each day of the week, and then hour of day along the top. Give you an idea of when your busiest times are, when your lightest times are. And lastly, we have aborted calls that shows the top 10 aborted calls by telecommunicator, the top 10 aborted reasons, the number of aborted calls by month. And again, this one is configurable as well, that you can change it. Instead of by month, you can say by week or by day. And then the aborted calls that have happened within the last or within the time range up at the top. The next section is the telecommunicator section, where it, excuse me, it shows the same types of data, average call processing time by month, but instead of being system-wide, this is more focused on the telecommunicator that's selected here in this column over on the left.
Hey, Scott, since
Yes.
I'm more of a visual kind of person, is it possible to actually load a picture of our call takers or dispatchers in here? Or is that not a functionality?
I don't believe we have that functionality yet, but I like that idea. Just so yeah, let me add that. I think that'd be cool instead of just showing the generic person outline there.
Perfect.
So we have the average call processing time by month, the frequency of reconfigured calls and aborted calls, and then the distribution of determinant levels. And these are, again, all focused on the one dispatcher that we have selected. We also have the protocols breakdown. So you can see here the protocol, and even drill down by clicking the little arrow to the left on each protocol to show how many of those types of cases that dispatcher or telecommunicator has handled within the date range specified.
So all of you that use card 26, we can see you. It's just one of my pet peeves. I had to jump in.
I wouldn't have expected anything else, Carlin. Next is protocol summary. This shows the top 10 final protocols, and then again, the top 10 final dispatch codes. You can see here 26, Carlin would be taking a look at that.
So for those of you that might not know what card 26 is, it's the sick person. And that card's to be used only when there's not a more identifiable chief complaint. So that's why I kind of pulled that out as an example.
And again, we have the protocols breakdown. This time it's by system. It is not by a dispatcher. So we have here the count, the percentage on your system, and then the all systems percentage. This used to be a column called national average, but we changed that to all systems percentage as it is now a real time. It takes into account all of the dispatch centers on the system or on the Academy Analytics systems and what their average percentage is for that type of call. Next up, we have, excuse me, specialty protocols. The first one, we have two different types of specialty protocols that we break out. One of them is cardiac respiratory arrest that shows the number of cases, average call processing time, and average time to dispatch. A bunch of information about that particular card, including the breakdown, times to hands on chest by month. And again, this one can be modified to say by day or by week. Percentage of hands on chest by month, and then call volume by month.
Scott, your screen is, needs to, there you go. Thank you.
And one of the ones that we've is relatively new as well is the pandemic epidemic outbreak. And on pandemic epidemic outbreak, we can see here the number of cases is 521. And then we also break down things that are pertinent to that card that we've identified as being high value for that particular protocol. So you can see the number of respondents that had new recent cough, fever, difficulty speaking between breaths, whether they were considered a high-risk patient, etc. And again, we have a breakdown of the different protocols and then the call volume by month that can be, let me change this. Call volume by day. And then lastly, we have EIDS data, which is the emerging infectious disease surveillance. And this one is trying to load data. This one, because it's a lot more text, it takes a little bit longer to load. It's not just aggregated data that it's loading here. And so there we go. So we have our data loaded. And one of the new things that we've just added here is a widget at the bottom that shows the call volume by EIDS type by month. So you can see here the number of questions that were answered positive, negative less than 15 seconds, negative greater than 15 seconds, and then the total. And just real quick, the reason that we broke out the negative less than 15 seconds and negative greater than 15 seconds is because we've basically said that a telecommunicator will take at least 15 seconds to ask and get answers for all of the EIDS questions. And that if there are any rounds of EIDS that were put in where the EIDS window was open and subsequently closed within 15 seconds, it's very likely that not all of those questions were asked and answered sufficiently. So we have flagged those to let you know that.
Great, Scott, that was an awesome overview and hopefully a quick refresher for anyone that might have needed it. So thank you.
No worries.